So welcome back to the 47th Annual Trade Expo, where we are shifting our focus to restaurants. Before we do that though, for those of you who did register to attend this, we said we were going to draw some gift card winners from a local restaurant. So we're going to do one of those right now. Danelle from the Beach Walk Hotel has gotten these all shaken up. We're going to dig to the bottom, and the winner of the Pit and Pub gift certificate is Stephen Pappas from the Original Green Turtle. And no, this is not rigged. Stephen, I hope you like pork, because Pit and Pub has awesome pork. All right, thank you. So, Carrie and Marshall, Maryland and Delaware Restaurant Association. A lot has gone on over the last year. We know that operators have had to really be tenacious. They've had to be innovative. They're rising to meet this new world. I'm going to start with you, Marshall, and let's talk about Maryland restaurants for just a second. What have you seen in terms of the models, how they've shifted, what changes are going to be going forward, and if operators haven't done some of those changes, what should they be doing to operate now in today's new normal?
We get this question a lot as to what does the future of the industry look like, and as everyone's trying to figure it out, there is one answer that I think is going to resonate across all, no matter what kind of business segment you have. And it's the idea of takeout and carryout. We have learned over the past year that restaurants that do not historically offer takeout have figured out a way to do so, out of necessity. But even more importantly, the consumer that wouldn't normally think of getting takeout from a certain restaurant has probably done so, realized that, hey, it's a great option. And I think there's going to be an expectation from consumers that restaurants continue to do that and to do it well. So that's really the one thing that when you look at all the different changes, whether it be expanding the outdoor space, which yes, I think that's going to be important as we move forward as well, but it's really the idea of carry out that I think more than anything else, every restaurant had better figure out a way to offer great service, great food, and a great product from a carry-out perspective for consumers.
And alcohol to go, of course.
Yeah, I'll expand on that. You know, it's funny, this time last year, Susan, Marshall and I were actually speaking to groups on a report that the National Restaurant Association put forth called Restaurants 2030. And it was what the restaurant industry is going to look like in the decade to come. And restaurants had to adopt 10 years of growth in about 6 months. And to Marshall's point, carry out and delivery was so important. I'd like to add on that, and alcohol to go, by the way, the consumer loves it. We all love that. And I know in all of our state legislatures, we are looking to expand that permanently. I think currently 33 states in the District of Columbia have alcohol to go, and it's something that we as consumers have really liked. The one thing that I would say to add to Marshall's point on carry out and delivery, that's the adaptation to technology. I mean, restaurants had to kick and scream into contactless payments and really updated and upgraded websites and carry out and delivery platforms and to-go platforms. We never had to do this before. And so I'm proud of the industry, how they've really had to rush forward into 10 years of growth in a very short window.
Well, and I think what we've also seen is the industry suppliers are really stepping up their game to teach the operators, okay, you can go to my website and learn all these new things. And, you know, Cisco is an example of the Restaurants Rising website. They really are telling you how to do it. So it's almost like the industry suppliers, in addition to on the restaurant side, on the hotel side, the suppliers are really stepping up their game to help the operators figure all this out. Would you guys agree that's also happening for lodging?
We mentioned Ecolab earlier.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
About suppliers, but to you guys in the food service, this take-home liquor, I have to admit I've used it. Where does open container laws and DUI laws, where does that crisscross with liquor to go though?
Do you want to take it or?
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, listen, there's been a little bit of pushback from package store sectors about alcohol to go. And using the issue of you buy a bottle of wine or a 6-pack of beer at a liquor store, you can certainly go to your car and open it up. People don't, right? This is meant to be taken home. It's sealed in a container. people aren't drinking it in their cars on the way home. They're ordering their margarita and they're taking it home with their tacos. So I haven't seen it as a problem. We certainly haven't seen a rise in DUIs as a result of it, and I really don't think it's going to happen.
Good.
Here in Maryland, we already have the wine bottle law, where if you order a bottle of wine from a restaurant and you don't finish it, they will cap it for you and you can take it home.
We have that
so it's
too.
almost akin to that. And as we mentioned, we've learned over the past year that it's not problematic, that people continue to do so responsibly, and it's very convenient for the consumer when they order an Italian dinner to go from a place they don't traditionally do so, that hey, getting the nice bottle of wine that they like, that they know is carried at that restaurant, is a great benefit. You don't have to make a second stop and hopefully find that same bottle of wine. And I think people do realize that purchasing alcohol from a restaurant actually does help the restaurant get through things as well.
Well, and I think we've done a really good job as an industry to really show how we've been impacted and the dire straits that a lot of our employees are in, where they're not making the money they used to make, or the operators are in dire straits. So I think that in terms of ordering takeout and getting carry out, I really think the consumer is akin to that, and they want to do it. This is this age of disruption, and I think that it's great, and we're going to have to continue promoting that. A lot of our associations do here's the carry out website, or here's all the people who are offering carry out, so we're going to continue doing that. In terms of Carrie, I'm going to turn to you for a second. I know that you probably were part of the State of the National Restaurant Association address, and Marshall, I'm sure you watched it as well. We all did. We were glued to our screens. I want you to touch on, if you can for me, the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, the Unified Restaurant Act, that's part of this America Rescue Plan. How does all that fit into how we're going to move forward as restaurants?
Listen, there is no story in the media that has not addressed the impact of restaurants in our communities, in our states, and across the country. And I know that Marshall and I are both grateful in our own states that the National Restaurant Association has been so successful, by the way, with a lot of help and advocacy from our state level and from our state senators and leaders at additional relief for restaurants. And just this weekend, we've heard that the Senate has passed an additional relief fund targeted just for restaurants. I think the end result will be about $30 billion that's going to come in targeted relief for restaurants. Still has to get through the House, but we are grateful, I know we are in Delaware, to our two senators, Chris Coons and Tom Carper. Chris Coons specifically, I'd like to give a shout out, as he really championed restaurants in this last package. So we think it's going to go through, and we have more help coming for restaurants in the very near future, we think.
We do.
Yeah. When we look at the future and what does the road to recovery look like, most restaurateurs that I speak to tell me that it is going to be 3 to 5 years before they feel like they are fully recovered. So when you look at all of these government programs, whether at the federal level be the targeted grants, the PPP, the state and local funds, all of these dollars have been helpful to keep restaurants afloat. And I think that when we look at the next year, it's probably going to be the same. Nobody is going to quickly be able to turn things around and get back to the way they were. There's a long road ahead for a full restaurant recovery. So I encourage every business owner to, if you haven't done so already, you have to look at the PPP program from the federal level. We just heard a little while ago that there's still $140 billion still available. Here in Ocean City, if you haven't applied, I don't know what you're waiting for. You need to do so now, because you can use that money over 24 weeks, and that'll get you through past Labor Day.
Right.
You don't want that money not to be available. Hopefully, more federal grant funds will come through that. Nearly $30 billion, as Carrie said, and all of these things help us to kind of limp along till we can get back to a place where we can start the real road to recovery in earnest.
If I can add to that a little bit, because I spoke about it this morning, I was doing a couple radio shows. Restaurants are not in recovery yet. We are in transition. And, when we talk to elected officials, or when people start going out and, now they see us at 50% capacity and think, wow, things are great. All of our industry is living on subsidies right now. And we will be in an industry that never had their hand out, right? Never. So it's important to understand that this money is necessary for the survival of this industry to get through this transitional period, as Marshall said.
And we
That's
will
a
not
great
begin the road to recovery until restrictions are lifted and consumer confidence comes back and we get back to a regular rotation of people coming into restaurants.
Right, and we're certainly fighting for that. We've formed a lot of different collaborative groups where we're really pushing Governor Hogan to let us have seating with back-to-back booths. Are you in Delaware? Can you sit in a back-to-back booth?
Yes, you can sit in a back-to-back booth if you have a barrier.
Okay.
Or
Indoors.
Indoors. Outside, you can be at 100% capacity as long as you have social distancing. However, obviously nobody's outside right now, so that is a tough call. As far as reopening, it's very important that we work with our governor's office, Governor Carney or Governor Hogan, because we need a plan, and especially down here at the beach communities, our operators are telling us, how are we going to hire? How do we know what staffing we need for the summer, whether we need an extra line cook or a dishwasher, if we don't at least have a stepped up plan for reopening. So we have a call with our governor on Friday, and that's exactly what we'll be asking for.
Yeah, we don't want here on Thursday is the press conference. You can open on Friday. We don't want that. We're trying to,
Right.
Ask for a little bit of a time. Now, in terms of the federal level, Chip mentioned the $15 minimum wage, something that is very concerning. And, here in Ocean City last year, we were already at $15 for line cooks. We were at $14 for housekeepers. So I think that, certain markets have already gotten to that point. What scares me the most is the discussion of the elimination of the tipped wages and all of that. I mean, I was a server for 6 years. My kids are servers. That gives you the opportunity to really give great service and make great money in a short period of time. So, Marshall, I know that the Restaurant Association of Maryland is really working hard on this issue. Do you want to talk about that for a second, please?
Sure, and here in Maryland, we all know that we are already on the path to a $15 an hour minimum wage. But the tip credit is of the utmost importance, and it should concern every restaurateur, every server, every tip employee. And the reason being is pretty simple, in that being able to pay an employee a tip wage plus tips allows restaurants to keep costs affordable. And in turn, people are able to dine out regularly and go to restaurants because it is affordable. If indeed we have to pay servers a full minimum wage, tips are not going to be available, and here's why. We feel that a couple things are going to have to happen. Restaurants are going to have to increase their prices by probably 20% at least. They're probably most likely going to have to add a service charge of 20 or 25% to the bill in order to help pay for the cost of the tipped employees. And guess who's not going to get 20% moving forward? It's going to be the individual, the server, the bartender. So the restaurant loses, the consumer loses with higher prices, and the tipped employee loses because they're going to be making less money. We all know that it's in law. If a tipped employee doesn't make a full minimum wage with their tips, the employer has to make that up. So we really don't understand the logic behind elimination of the tip credit. And if we don't address that, dining out to eat in a full-service restaurant may very well become a luxury item, because not very many people I know are going to go out and pay a $59.95 for a steak, $28.95 for a hamburger and fries. And that's what we'll be looking at. And we'll also be looking at the elimination of full-service restaurants. We're going to have a lot more fast casual and quick service restaurants. And when I go for my birthday celebration, I want to be waited on. So I'm really hopeful that we can get that message across to lawmakers, but it's really the restaurateurs and the tipped employees that have to help us in telling lawmakers that it doesn't make sense to eliminate the tip credit.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that everybody that's watching needs to know. We as association leaders can't keep saying the message loud enough. We need the people who are actually affected to be the ones who tell the lawmakers what's going on, because they're tired of hearing about the industry issues from the mouthpieces. We're paid to do it. We advocate. That's our jobs. We need the people who are really affected. And I think that is what happened in D.C. So, D.C. changed it, and then the employees in DC, correct, Marshall? Am I
Yep.
right in telling this story? The DC employees got together and said, no, we want our tipped wages. And they were able to repeal the law, but only because the employees got fired up.
Yep, it's the perfect example that everyone in Washington D.C., Congress or the senators should pay attention to. That in that Washington D.C. passed the elimination of the tip wage, passed it. It was into law, ready to go. 6 months later, it was repealed because the lawmakers realized they made a mistake because they heard loud and clear from thousands, if not tens of thousands of tipped employees that this is what they did not want, and it actually was going to force them to make less money than they were making now. So you cannot understate the importance of having tipped employees be in the forefront of this argument. And the only way to do that is we as restaurant owners and managers, we have to have honest conversations with our employees and explain to them that no, you're not going to be able to make $15 an hour plus tips. Here's why that model doesn't work, and this is why we won't be able to survive. If you're not having that honest communication, then employees may not realize how it's going to affect them directly.
So do we, as association leaders, have toolkits that we can give the operators and the restaurant owners? Because we all know in restaurants, owners are at the brink of doing everything, all the jobs. So I think that we should make sure we have toolkits for them to pass down and give them the talking points. Do we have that yet?
Yeah, we do. Actually, I'd like to just talk a little bit about that because in Delaware, we actually have a piece of legislation that's before our legislature that doesn't seek to eliminate the tip credit, but it would make the cash wage, the server wage, 65% of the minimum wage. And honestly, we don't really need too many toolkits, although we have them to communicate with our servers if that's a real threat to their tips. We know by fact that the closer you get to the minimum wage, the less people will tip their server. I mean, case in point, before the pandemic, we never tipped on carryout, right? Because the carryout people were making minimum wage, so they weren't making 20%. Right now in Delaware, organically, like in Washington, D.C., we have servers that are coming out of the woodwork talking to their elected officials how they don't like the fact that their tips are being threatened. We have, I think, 2,000 servers that have already signed a petition in Delaware alone that says thanks, but no thanks. It's the problem is our elected officials are so in their bubble, they don't understand how people are paid, and servers don't want anybody messing with their tips.
No, because they make great wages.
Carrie, that's a that's a great point, if I may. The whole federal minimum wage issue, while important, right? That anybody that's looking to go out into the workforce should earn a livable wage. I get that. But we operate in 19 states. $15 an hour in New York City, for example, would be an insult to anybody there. Whereas in other markets we operate in, it would upset the entire economy, right? The infrastructure of the economies would be negatively impacted in pricing versus per capita income measures. The other thing that I would think of if I was a restaurant owner, wouldn't I just raise my menu price and put a sign on my window or in each menu that says your gratuity is already covered, in which case you're forcing me as the business owner to take that money, the additional money, which I think the typical server makes much more, you're putting me in the position to pull that money from my own employee's pocket. And I just find that, as a non-restaurant owner, I find that to be an unfair position to put my colleague in.
Yeah, and I think that's what Marshall was saying, right? It really forces the operator to adopt that country club model where everybody has the service charge. And I have to tell you, tipping is part of our American culture. The consumer likes it and the employee likes it. I respectfully debate our legislators all the time that don't understand. I'm like, no, my husband at one point was a straight commission copier salesman and nobody worried about his base wage.
Yeah.
This is commission employees, our servers, and they do a beautiful job at servicing their customers. It's what we need coming out of this pandemic is this beautiful service. It's why we go out. And I think they should be celebrated, and this does not help the very people that some of our elected officials try to help.
Couldn't agree more.
I was thinking quite the way you guys was doing. And I've said this to my staff and any government representative that I serve on the co-chair of the Merit Lodging Government Affairs, and I work with the HLA in Washington a lot. I think that this pandemic and what we're going through has educated not just government officials, but Americans in general just how important the service industry is.
100%.
I mean, when you look at the economy and we talk about it, how bad it is, we're really looking at that from inside our own bubble, aren't we? Because retail, automotive, major purchases, all way through the roof. Stock market, as you brought up, Vince, totally
Home
unlike anything in
improvement.
2008. You can't buy a bicycle. But we're still in dire straits. It's because we've educated through all of our government affairs and the work you guys are doing as our association leaders of just how important this is, that when you put a government stay-at-home order in, look how many people you immediately put out of work, all in the service sector, which does define the United States.
So, and that kind of goes on to, I wanted to just quickly talk about business travel and, you know, how do we get back to restoring that business travel? People have really become accustomed to working from their homes, to teleworking, not so much in the restaurant industry because we can't. They like Zoom because we don't have to travel. So how are we going to get back the business travel and the meetings and conventions? You know, it's all about messaging, right? I mean, what are we going to do?
It's messaging, but it's also companies too. You know, I mean, because a lot of larger companies have restrictions on it. So I think they need to understand once the vaccinations are, and the brands and us as hoteliers need to understand, you know what, this whole thing with our industry being shut down so much in restaurants, and there's no fact that anything has ever happened there. You know,
Right.
the hotels or even meetings or restaurants, you know, they use science, but what is the science of tracing that came from a hotel or a restaurant? It's very minimal. Okay, but the answer, I think it goes back to larger companies, you know, because that's what I talk to. You know, I know Ben's on a lot of the boards. I'm on Hyatt's advisory board. You got to get the IBMs and the FedExes and all these companies to loosen their restrictions to travel. I think that's a big part of it.
Well, and that was part of the reason we didn't have an in-person trade show, because I surveyed the exhibitors, and we had lots of people saying my company still doesn't allow me to travel. So, you know, we were restricted by selling booths. So we do need to wrap this up here shortly. Are there any other things from a restaurant standpoint? You know, how can we develop the right messaging to continue to get people to order takeout? I mean, what can we do as a group? You know, is there anything?
I think it all is about consumer confidence. And now more than ever, we've learned the plight of restaurants. We all understand how important restaurants are to every community. And when we look to the future, once these restrictions are lifted, I think people are going to come back. I mean, they've really missed the opportunity to go out to lunch with their girlfriends, to go have happy hour after work with colleagues. And, you know, I get it. Zoom is fun and it's neat. It's not, it can't be long term, because at some point in time, business gets done with relationships, being face to face, being with your colleagues at work, being with your suppliers and other things. So I think there's really going to be this pent up demand at some point that we will come over the hump and you know, we'll get down that road. But unfortunately, we are stuck in a cycle now where the news is always about, yes, we have vaccinations, but it's all these buts. It's this, but there's another variant, but there's St. Patrick's Day coming up, but then there's Easter, and then there's Mother's Day. There's always something down the road. And I feel that, you know, from a public standpoint, there's a sense of frustration there. But when we look back over the entire year, restaurants, there's no data that shows that restaurants are a source of COVID spread. We've dealt with safety and sanitation every single day of the year, from day one of opening all the way through.
Right.
And it's just not proven that restaurants are this, you know, hotbed of COVID spread. And I think that's the message that we need to reinforce, is that we continue to be safe, and we're ready to welcome you back when you are.
Excellent. So I think we had a question pop in. What is that, Ann? Michael?
We have a question from this.
Can you read it loudly?
From Gary Cleaver. Question for the panelists.
It's actually from Carrie Cleaver. The question for the panelists: what type of training would you like your future and current employees to have?
Okay, so Carrie Cleaver is with Warwick, and we actually have an earned grant from the state of Maryland to do some hospitality training. So she's asking, what kind of training do we need for our employees? Is there something that you want to specifically answer to that?
I can speak for what we're doing, and we're doing it, we did it at your school, Mike, at West Virginia University, we're doing it at Florida International University, we're doing it at University of Maryland Eastern Shore in a major way, and that is using academia to introduce the concepts of our industry to students that are in school, and we extend that to on-the-job training as well. So learning how to read a STAR report, learning how to read a labor report. If I can do that in an academic setting, where it's not, trial by fire and is an organized pace, that is a tremendous value to us as an industry for those middle line managers and junior managers. On an hourly basis, the discipline of working, I think is huge. Going back to what we were talking about with Zoom versus in person, I think we have to look at our society in a different way. You look at the folks that are sitting at on this panel, and we've all been in the workforce for decades, right? And so we're used to that Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. It's part of our DNA. We're failing to recognize what it's like to take an associate that is with you that has only been in the workforce for 2, 3, 4 years, and then all of a sudden this happens, and they're used to now working from home, working a varied schedule, working from the beach, working from wherever. Are we going to be in a position to say, okay, it's all over today, so as of Monday morning, and every day until next Saturday, you will come into the office, or you will come into the hotel, or you come in and give me your 5 days out of 7 from here on out. And I think that's going to be a huge thing. It's one of the reasons that I was trying to get in touch with Lachelle, with our chamber, is we need to prepare. We thought shutting down was hard, right? In 17 days, we went from beating 2019 to our occupancy was 68% down. And we haven't talked at all about how do we prepare the workforce and ourselves to bring people back. And I'm starting to think that's going to be a little bit tougher than what it was to shut down.
Yeah, especially given what's happening in Congress right now.
Yeah.
Exactly. Now we're competing with our own federal government. So I think that the benefits of the work of working, the social benefits, the financial benefits, and the upward mobility, in other words, long-term career, as students that the questioner is looking toward, has decades before their height of their earning potential, and they're not going to get there if they decide to take a $300 a week check for the time being. I really believe long-term, what we're doing is doing more harm for our society than it's ever good. Yes, people need to survive, but we need to look at the long-term impacts of every action we're doing, and I don't think that we're doing that.
I think one thing that the universities can do for programs is technology. I mean, there's a lot of common STAR reports Ben brings out, but hot sauce, there's a lot of technology. I know the hotel industry and in the restaurant industry, we're in both, but having them, they have Microsoft Office skills, but there are so many programs on how to book events and how to do so many other things in technology that now they learn quick, but there are a lot of common denominators. Delphi is very similar to a lot of other systems. So if they came to work understanding a PMS system, because they're all, the brands have different brands, but they all are Oracle based or somewhere, that would be helpful. I know they do internships and stuff, but sometimes you're taking a graduate and they don't have those day-to-day skills in some of those technologies.
Good point. Well, and I think technology is certainly going to be something that has changed from this pandemic moving forward because of the touchless that is so prominent now. That's not going to change. We are running out of time.
Can I bring up a point?
Absolutely.
Because I think there's an element that's missing a little bit is the banquet business, where it's obviously big in our business, especially full service hotels, restaurateurs, Harry's, it's a banquet room, and I think that's been an industry that's been under. Where do they fall in? Are they a restaurant, especially places that are just event holder places, so they don't fall in anywhere. But you talked about how do we recover back from borders? How does so we need to be advocating also for events. I mean, in Delaware, I'm on this task force, and we just fought to be able to lift 10. This meeting right here would be illegal in Delaware a week ago because you can't have more than 10 people in a room. Okay, and we own and manage banquet facilities, and couldn't have weddings, people just driving there. But I think the banquet event business needs some voice too.
I think it's interesting because everybody that's in this room and everybody that's on the other end of the technology we're using is, we're all in the business of bringing people together.
Right.
And now the government is saying, you can't do that anymore. So,
Well, we're going to bring people together, and travel is going to come back for sure. I just want to thank you guys for taking the time out today, and you gentlemen from the hotel side, and you guys for watching. You know, we as leaders have to remind everyone of the joy of the face-to-face connection and the joy of travel. And we need to continue to make sure that we use the right words so that we are making the perception the reality. You know, so our words are very important. We have one more winner to draw from our restaurant pool for those of you watching. So while Danelle's coming over, I will say we're doing our part to bring people together. April 15th, we're having a Hotel Motel Restaurant Association dinner meeting, a networking event, which is going to be a little bit different, but we are pulling everyone together. We'll be at the convention center, so we certainly invite you all to come to that as well. So our final winner for the restaurant drawing is, drum roll please, Wayne King from the Cross Street Tavern, which is a new tavern down on Wycomico Street. Wayne King, you are going to Pickles. You can probably walk there. So thank you guys for joining me today. For those of you who did win, I'll make sure you get your certificates. Any parting words for anyone?
Well, I think I just want to say one thing. Listen, what keeps people up at night in this industry, it might not be technology or the food, it's about the people. So as soon as we can get as close to normal as possible, we can continue to add luster to the lives of those people we serve. So thanks for having us today. Appreciate
That's a
it.
great way to end. We're going to add luster to the lives that we serve. So thank you guys for joining us today. And we do have OceanCityTradeExpo.com. I will be posting the recordings of these today. In addition to that, we have our Expo Marketplace catalog, which will be live as soon as I get back to the office. And that's from our exhibitors, so thank you to the exhibitors who might be watching who did buy ads in the Expo Marketplace, and thank you Ocean City Today for putting that together for me. That's going to be a resource, so that's going to be where people can source and find products, and that'll be online. So a very different 47th Annual Trade Expo.
Yes.
However, 2022, we're going to be back on March 6th and 7th, and we're going to welcome you back with a vengeance. So thanks for joining us.